Today we're talking about Trans Parent Day. And each year on the first Sunday in November, so that this year, that's the 6th of November, it's Trans Parent Day. So it's about pushing back on this cis heteronormativity associated with many events: birthdays, Christmases, Father's Day, Mother's Day, Valentine's, all those events that we expect parents to come in two flavors. And we don't expect them to change flavors either. So a man and a woman. But we recognise, I hope today, that trans people who are parents come in multiple flavours, including those that are not gendered at all. It's also a challenge to cis people who are parents coming to terms with their affirmed child's gender. So today I'm joined by Josephine Hughes, who is a cis parent of three amazing children. Two of them are her fabulous trans daughters and her son. I myself am a trans woman and dad to two amazing cis children, my son and daughter. And don't worry, I have checked. That is their identity. And we have both faced different and sometimes difficult challenges as parents. And in this video, I would like to share some of those perspectives with you. So, hello, Josephine.
Hello.
Uh, you had three boys. You identified as a mother of three sons. And I remember you used that word when we spoke before, identified as a mother of three sons. So, how's that changed for you?
Yes, so I now have two daughters and a son. So a lot of my journey as a parent has been learning to have a transition in my own identity. And one day I thought my daughter, as she is now, um, thought she was a son at the time, was going to tell me something about a relationship that she was in. And I asked her what was going on. There was a very long pause. And then she said to me, I think I'm a girl. And that was if you'd asked me what I was going to expect, that would have been the last thing that I thought that she would say. So then I became the mum of two sons and a daughter. And a few months later, my oldest child came out as transgender as well. So then I moved to being the mother of two daughters and a cis son. So it's been a big change in my life, and the parenting challenges of that as well is part of what we're going to talk about today, isn't it? So, Joanne, I'm really interested to hear about your experience as a parent because you mentioned that you are your children's dad, but you're a woman. So, how does that work? I'd love to know.
Yes, I think it all stemmed from, I transitioned later in life. So I was in my late 40s before I think the hardest bit coming out for me was coming out to myself. So it took me until I was in my late 40s. I'd shared with my wife my identity probably in 2012. And after that, I kind of explored it and became more comfortable with it and became more aware of it. And my wife made me promise that I wouldn't disrupt our children's education. So, and I agreed. I agreed. I wanted our children to finish their education and in the most positive way possible without having me, if you like, disrupt their thinking. So, on the 8th of July 2016, our son graduated from university. And a week later, I drove to Brighton, where my daughter was living with her fiance, and shared the news with her. And I then came back home to share the news with my son. And while I was talking to my children, both my son and my daughter, trying to explain who I was, what was going on, I made them a promise. I made them a promise that I would always be their dad, no matter what I looked like, what I sounded like, what happened in my life. I would always be their dad, and I would always be proud to be their dad. It's a label I've owned for all of their lives. It's a label that they've identified me as for all of their lives, and it's something I don't want to lose, and it's not necessary for me to change that because my wife Marie, she's mum, and I don't want to steal her space or take over her position as matriarch or head of the family. I recognise I've got to carve my own identity out with my children, with all the rest of our family. So that's kind of how I became dad and happy to stay dad. And
Yeah.
it's, as I say, I'm really proud of it. Josephine, what have you noticed about your daughters since they transitioned that you maybe hadn't noticed before?
I think it's so interesting, such an interesting question. And honestly, I think the answer is that certainly with my oldest daughter, there's been such a change in her in that she is so much more relaxed because I don't think she's fighting this internal battle any longer with herself. And although I had no idea that she was transgender, both myself and other people have commented on the change within herself, how she seems much more at peace. And then with my younger daughter, what I've noticed in particular, again, she is very, very happy to be in her identity. Um, she loves being a woman. She'll say that. But also, I've seen this lovely blossoming of her personality and her ability to be who she really is. And I would say that I feel that they're fuller in a sense. They're more themselves because they're able to be who they really are, that they're able to match sort of who they are to the world with who they know they are inside. And so that's what I'd say is the real difference that I've seen in my daughters since they came out. Um, I'm absolutely fascinated, Joanne, to hear your story. So, how did your children take the news? What was it like as a parent for you and for your
It
children?
it was very nerve wracking. I didn't know how to do it. I think I just it was like kind of a sticky plaster, taking the sticky plaster off quickly moment. When I drove to my daughter, I told her I was going to come and see her. I had something really important to say, and it was obviously an hour's drive from near Portsmouth to Brighton. So there's a whole hour and a bit of her contemplating why Dad is rushing to see me at 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock on a Saturday night. What's wrong, and why are you coming? And I said I've got something really important to tell you, and it was. So I just said, sat her in the car. I had a white BMW 4 Series convertible at the time, and we drove along Brighton seafront, parked up with the roof down. It was a nice sunny day or sunny evening, and I told her, and and she said, "Well, I knew something." She
Oh,
said, "I knew you were going to tell me something today, and I suspected something." She'd noticed I'd been shaving my legs. She noticed that I had acrylic nails from time to time, even with no colour on them. She noticed that I was. She noticed I had a drawer, a bedside table drawer with makeup in it, and it wasn't the kind of brand that Marie was using. So there's MAC and other expensive brands in there. And one day when we were out, and her and her fiance were staying at our flat, she had a rummage through my wardrobe and found dresses and bras and falsy boobs and those sort of things. So she had it in her head that I was a drag queen and I was a performer, because at my 50th party, I actually booked a drag performer before I came out to the world to perform at my 50th birthday. And my daughter spotted the fact that I seemed to know this drag artist really, really well. So she either thought I was a drag artist or a drag artist agent in my spare time. So when I said I was trans, it was a different news, maybe confusing. And at the time, we cried, we both cried a lot, and it seemed to go as well as you can expect. But I guess with any big trauma type news like this, it doesn't always hit straight away. So when I told my son when I got back home, he was more bothered that I told my daughter first, not him, considering he was in the home when I left to go and tell my daughter. I said, "Well, I just need to tell our daughter first because she's the oldest." And he was kind of like a bit sort of 25-year-old YOLO, whatever, Dad, to get on with it. I'm not here to tell you about your life. You got to do what you got to do. So I just thought that was kind of very pragmatic of him. But it wasn't really until, I suppose, over the next few months where my daughter didn't really want to have a conversation with me. She wouldn't speak to me on the phone. I'd text her and she didn't reply. And it transpired that she had a huge amounts of anxiety about this. And she would kind of cope with me because she kept seeing me as Dad. So I didn't wear a wig or makeup or things in her presence. So she kept seeing me as Dad. But it got to the point where I had a hair weave fitted, which was kind of permanent. And then she saw me. Well, she had no choice but to see me presenting as a woman. And that point there, her anxiety took over even more, and she effectively excommunicated me. She wrote me a letter and basically said I was dead to her. I wasn't allowed to have my name on Christmas cards. I wasn't allowed to come for Christmas or anything like that. So it was a real blow, and it really put strain on the family because what it meant was my wife would go and have Christmases with our daughter, son, and her fiance at the time, who's now her husband, and I had to go with have Christmas dinner with a friend, or we'd have our Christmas day on Boxing Day, or we'd have our son round, but not our daughter. And that was a real tricky time because I knew my wife was meeting our daughter, and I wouldn't have stopped her. So for about 2 years, I had very little contact with my daughter. My son was okay. I think to be fair, he was uncomfortable, but coping. And I think it's fair to say both of our children, and even my wife, would prefer me not to have transitioned. Whilst they embrace me now, everyone would admit they would rather I didn't because it's created confusion. And it wasn't until something traumatic happened in our daughter's life, in her relationship with her fiance, that it disrupted her thinking enough that she needed dad more than the anxiety or more than the argument. So I phoned her up and said, "Look, I'm here to help. I'm here to help you. What can I do?" And we drove down that evening to see her where they lived, had a conversation about the trauma she was going through, and it was like nothing had ever happened. We pressed pause 2 years ago, and we pressed play and record again, and we just carried on. Yes, we did have a conversation a little bit later on where we went out for a drive in the convertible with the roof down on Brighton Seafront again, where we talked it over, and we analysed things. And she asked me questions, and I asked her questions, and we parked it in a position where she was comfortable but uncomfortable. She said, "I've got red lines, I've got boundaries. There's things I don't want to know about. I don't want to talk about. Um, I can cope with you as you are." I gave her away at a wedding. I was the father of the bride. I gave the father of the bride speech, walked down the aisle, did all those things in front of all of our family, his side and our side, and all of her friends. So it was a really proud moment for me in 2021 when she got married. And our son has just been kind of like that stoic, shruggy shoulder, late 20s young man who kind of copes with it. But he is also now happy. I think now the family's stable, we're back together again. It allows us all to chill out and take it easy. So yeah, it was tough, but I think we're through it. Josephine, how has your son and husband dealt with this readjustment? Because presumably I know it's like when I transitioned, it was all about me. Presumably your daughters, it's all about them. Is your son and husband sort of being excluded from this?
Yeah. Um, it's interesting to hear you talk about your son, Joanne, because my son was also, he was probably early 20s when his sisters came out. And he's been incredibly stoic about it as well. And I think that's partly his personality. He's very much an engineer, and that comes out, I think, in his whole way of being. He's very steady, he's very grounded, and his girlfriend tells the story of after we told him about his sisters, he got into the car and said to my almost daughter-in-law, "Oh, turns out I've got sisters." And she said, "Well, how do you feel about that?" And he sort of shrugged his shoulders. So very similar to your son, I think, Joanne. And he's just been an amazing support to everybody in the family, actually. He adores his sisters. They are so funny when they're together. It's always been something that they do, is that they share memes. My husband and I have absolutely no idea what they're talking about. I mean, really, we don't understand it at all. But it's sort of memes and memes and memes. And so they'll just have a hysterical conversation together. And that's the first thing they'll do. They'll all get together when they see each other and they'll start talking about memes. And it's sort of like the three of them re-establishing their relationship. So they are sort of get on really well with each other. And he's also quite protective of them as well. So he will look out for them, particularly his younger sister, who he's always been quite protective of. So he hasn't ever expressed difficulty. And in fact, I think, like many young people, they're really not bothered about other people's gender. They accept people as they are and they respect each other's right to say who they are. I think that's very, very noticeable. And he's always really supportive. And then, of course, my husband, that was quite different because, like me, he's a parent. And I think when you're a parent of, obviously, any parent, is like when you turned up for your daughter and said, "How can I help?" When our kids told us about being transgender, your main concern is, are they going to be all right? What can we do? How can we help? Um, and I think there's this big fear, especially because we didn't really know anything about what it's like to be transgender, and obviously that's changed over time. But it was a completely new world to us, and I think the biggest thing that we've had to get our heads around really is our children wanting to go through transition and get support to go through it medically. And so that in particular has been, for my husband, I think he's quite always been very supportive of them, expressing who they are, but he's worried about the effect of taking hormones, for example, because there's that question of how is this going to change their body, and always that question of, are they sure they're still young? Is it the right thing to do for them? But I think what we've seen, because we're so lucky, because they came out in 2015, so we've had time to see how they've developed, and we can really see how important this is to them, and that I think it's very unlikely that they would have a regret about it. Really, really unlikely. And we can see almost the other side. We can see that they're happier. Um, but I think that's always been his concern. But you have to balance that, don't you? You have to balance. There's that which perhaps, like your family, sort of say, in a sense, it would have been better. They would have preferred it if you hadn't transitioned. Um, yeah, that would have been their bodies just being men's bodies and dealing with all the sort of normal processes of being a man, whereas now they've changed. But we have to balance that against if they hadn't done it. And I think that's the important thing, because for them, this is out of this situation where they find themselves in this position of being transgender. What is the best thing for them to do? Because they're trans, the best thing for them to do is to take advantage of the help that's available to them. And out of the two choices, that's the better choice. So we respect that choice for them and we'll support them or whatever happens. So how about you, Joanne? How about, like, your wife? How did she cope with the change?
Um, I think the first, I think when I first told her in 2012, it was there was no, I didn't know where I was going. It was kind of, I described I think myself at the time in 2012 as a cross dresser. Been doing it all our life. We laughed a bit about it, about these clothes she'd found. She thought she'd forgotten she owned them, and I bought those. I just hid them in the wardrobe in amongst your clothes, sort of thing. So we joked about some of these times and how we used to go to fancy dress parties, and she'd always end up dressing as the man. I'd always end up dressing as the female character. So we joked about all these sort of times, and she said, "Oh, I need there's something." Um, but as it became kind of real, she had her anxiety was about the children finding out or the world finding out before she was ready. So that was kind of it. But I didn't know where I was going anyway. So when I came out in 2016 to the world, she wasn't really ready for that. It was kind of what was a private secret became a public knowledge, and she had a big anxiety about her parents finding out, how she's going to tell her parents, whatever her work colleagues found out. So there's a lot of stuff going on in her head about that. So she, in the same way that I came out, she had to come out as a wife of a trans person. And I also now then appreciated that our children had to come out as dads. My dad is trans, so they had to have their own coming out, and they still have to come out in the same way that anybody in the queer community has to keep coming out time and time again. Suddenly, our family is in a queer is attached to the queer community. My wife had to come to terms and re-examine her own sexuality, how she described herself, and she'll freely admit she ticked bisexual on the last census, and that's not something she would have ticked on the previous census or at any time in the past. But she started analysing it, and I suppose I'm lucky that she um, has allowed her sexuality to evolve, where she embraces the female side of me, and also, yeah, the inherent latent little masculine traits I have. But she does embrace the female side of me quite considerably. Children, I think they're just. I think now I've visually changed. I've had 2 hair transplants, so I don't wear a wig. I don't dress up in overtly feminine, flowery clothes or anything. I tend to wear kind of jumpers and leggings, and yeah, I do wear dresses. I do wear skirts in their presence, but I don't. I'm not a dressy dresser sort of thing. I never wear heels or uncomfortable shoes. So I'm always in Converse or boots or something. So they've kind of just got used to how I look now. I'm just this is how I am. Um, I think they freaked out more when I shaved my moustache off, and my daughter screamed her head off when I shaved my moustache off back in 2000, when she was what 8. She it was I suddenly realised that her whole visual identity of me had changed by the lack of my moustache. She couldn't even look at me for days. So I look back at that and my transition, and I can see similarities about how important someone looks is to people, and it rocked them. But yeah, they've changed. At first it was tricky. Christmas cards, Christmas presents. I made it quite clear that I wasn't looking for boys' toys or the typical man presents, socks and stuff. All the gadgets. I said, yeah, perfume and candles or something, even hankies. Just something that has a bit of femininity about it. And I think my wife Marie helped our children through that. So initially, I would suggest things as presents, like you do, Amazon wishlist, and Marie would say, "You can't ask for that. You can't ask for that. That'll freak them out." And now I just say what I want. I want a
Yeah.
dressing gown, a nice fluffy pink dressing gown, or I want an Oodie or something. Something kind of feminine, or I want some perfume, and it's kind of accepted now. It's no longer a big deal. And I think what we've all done as a family is realize that this construct of gender and these gender rules we have are kind of comfort blankets, and actually we can step outside of it and it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
But there's some things my daughter won't talk about, and she won't buy, and she really doesn't want to sort of go there, and she will say, "Dad, that's too far." I go, "Okay, I'll back a bit, then I'll go back." But now we walk around town. It's kind of funny sometimes when I remember we were in Tesco's, and she said, "Oi, Dad." I said to her, "Look, I don't mind you shouting 'Oi, Dad,' but can you do it not quite as loudly, because it kind of confuses me. It kind of confuses everybody around me." I go, so I have to sidle over and go, "You mean me?" Yeah, and that's quite funny. So we laugh about that, but we go hiking together. We do stuff together.
Yeah.
My brothers coped, and yeah, my brother and his new wife coped. They got married after I transitioned, and even though I knew his wife as a friend myself, actually I knew my brother's wife before he did as a friend, so she knew me, the old me. But since they got married, I've always been Joanne in their marriage, if you like. So that was kind of cool. Um, yeah, so I think it's an evolution, and it didn't happen quickly. It didn't happen overnight. It's taken, well, where are we now? 6 years since I was out and transitioned, really, and it's taken every year's better, every week's better, every month is better, every day's better. It's kind of thing, and I think we're just getting comfortable with each other and having to relearn all those things about the relationship. But we're all kind of up for it, which is nice. So talk about relationships in this way. We use a lot of gendered language, don't we? Gendered terms: brother, sister, grandson, granddaughter, nephew, niece, uncle, aunt, all those kind of terms. Have you had to adapt any of those within your family unit, Josephine?
Well, obviously, the main one is the girls, and remembering remembering not to misgender them. And I mean, even yesterday we were on a call with my daughter, and I didn't even notice that I'd misgendered her, and my husband pointed it out. Because when I misgender them, I always try and correct myself straight away, and we will correct each other as well, because we think it's really important that we show them that we want to gender them properly. So when we make that mistake, we'll correct ourselves straight away. What came up for me just listening to you then is the stuff around Christmas. Because one of the big changes in birthdays, we always used to buy them cards to our wonderful son. And we had to make that change. And that was weird. That was weird to make that change from buying these jokey sun cards. You know, they tend to be about drinking, silly cards, men's type cards where they're not really very emotionally gooey, to buying these pretty cards with sparkles on and reindeer, that sort of thing, and buying those for our daughters. And it just listening to you talking about Christmas reminded me of that really. And that was something that we it always feels a bit different to do that. It feels I've got to consciously do it in a sense. And alongside that, there can be that little bit of, oh, this is different. This is different to the way it used to be. So there can be a little bit of a ooh
Mm.
feeling that goes along with that. But in terms of your questions, I think it's really interesting. The rest of the family, our wider family, are okay with calling them the girls. If it's a bit difficult, they might use their names, but they very nobody uses their dead names. That those have gone, and they will call them by their proper names. But I can remember when I came out. No, they came out. That sister-in-law, my brother and sister-in-law have younger children, and they would have been primary school age, perhaps later primary school age at that point. And I can remember my sister-in-law saying to me, "Oh, I've I've got to work out how to tell the girls about their cousins." And so this thing about coming out, you don't realize in a sense how it reverberates through the family. But I think for the little ones, those little kids, and we've got a nephew and niece who live much closer to us, they just accept them the way they are, and we sort of have to tell them. They thought we thought they were a boy, but actually it turns out that they're girls, and we explain that to them. And the little ones do tend to misgender them, but I think because they're so little, you just think, yeah, we just that's fine. They're only little, and I think possibly it'll be good for them sort of growing up to know that they've got transgender people in their family, because it's part of life. I've also got a transgender sister as well, and I'm having to get my head around her and remember to call her her, and remember to call she's only changed her name very slightly, but to remember to call her. And also again, there's that what you're talking about coming out, because I have to, I say, oh, and I've got a transgender sister as well. So I think the family, what you said about you become part of the queer community, that is what's happened to us as well. And it was something unexpected, but it's great.
Yeah.
It's not really a problem. So yeah, it's just a change. We've had to get our head around a change, but I actually think it's been a really positive thing in our lives to have that happening to us. So I think it's been really good for us as a family, actually.
Mm. I've got two nephews, and they're 18 and 20, 18, 21, that sort of age. So they're kind of when I first came out, they were kind of, I suppose, mid-teens. Um, and my brother at the time made me promise not to tell them just yet, and it was almost like he wanted to keep me a dirty secret for a few years. But we were kind of connected on Facebook, and leakage happens, doesn't it? So they kind of
Mhm.
got to hear about me, and they knew about me. We were probably on WhatsApp and stuff like that. My photo changed, those sort of things. Um, and I, 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 I I haven't specifically changed myself from uncle to auntie. I think we just, because as they've matured, I've just become Joe.
Yeah.
They call me Joe, and we
Hmm.
don't need to be uncle or auntie Joe. It's not. I don't think we use those traditional
yeah,
formalities anymore. I'm just Joe. So the challenge I think I've got at the moment, what we as a family have got, is our daughter's planning to start a family at some point in the near future, and she's already had a kind of quiet conversation with Marie, my wife, about the what do they call me, and so there's a bit of anxiety going on there about how do I become a grandparent in terms of my naming,
yeah,
and I haven't had the conversation with my daughter yet. I mean, my preference is I'm dad to her, but I'll be Grandma Joe to her children. I hope
yeah,
that's what
yeah,
I'd hope to be, or
yeah,
Jojo. A lot
yeah.
of people call me Jojo, so if they want to call me Jojo and cut out any gendered term, I'd be happy with that as well.
That's
So
quite
yeah,
nice.
it's an evolution. Every month, there's always another thing. Have to think about that one as well. And what do we say about
Yeah,
that? But we're talking. That's the key thing. Okay, there's a bit of anxiety, a bit of confusion, but I think one of the things is that we are talking, and it's okay. And I get misgendered by my brother occasionally, and my new sister-in-law will pick him up and go, "Come on, see." Oh, I'll pick him up, or Marie will pick him up. And the only people, so my dad was quite. He found it quite hard to change using my name and my gender. But a couple of months ago, we met. He came out for coffee, and he just called me Joe.
no,
And it was like I was sitting there every time he said Joe, I was like, "What?" It's like
wow,
it's like it's almost like the equivalent of being misgendered. It's like, but being correctly named. It's like that shock. And my
wow,
mum was amazing. I told her probably 3 or 4 months after I came out to everybody else, and I remember sitting in a cafe talking to her about it, and sort of tears in her eyes. And I've never asked her what those tears were, sadness or joy or confusion. And now we meet for coffee, and she'll give me a couple of scarves or a handbag or some brooches she has, or she's been in the charity shop and found this. Would I like it? Sort of thing. And it's good. I'm getting these little daughterly presents and daughterly acknowledgements, and the cards and the Christmas cards, birthday cards I get off my mum now are very much daughter focused, and it's like it's so affirming and so wonderful to be treated as a as me by my mum. In the same way
yeah,
you're treating your children as mum in the way
yeah,
that they want, and it's.
yeah,
And I remember when I told my mum, it was important for me to tell her, and I realised it was a bit selfish why I was doing it, because I felt I couldn't be honest with myself or the world if I couldn't be honest with my mum. It was kind of
mm,
until my mum knew, I still had a secret, and that so it was really important that my mum knew. And I did bottle it with my dad. I ended up waiting a year after that, and I wrote him a letter and told him uh, because he's elderly, he's
yeah,
very hard of hearing, and it was. I know he's very stuck in his ways in certain things, so it was a hard conversation to have with someone who couldn't hear very well. So we communicated by letter initially because it was easier to process. But yeah, it was. I think we still learn. Whether our daughter ever genders me correctly, I don't know. Um, but I've kind of taken the attitude that I don't want her to feel uncomfortable around me. And I don't feel uncomfortable around her. So if he and hims me occasionally, or she never she and hers me. So she either calls me dad or misgenders me on my pronouns. But I don't want to make that a big deal. It doesn't.
yeah,
Out of all the people in the world, our children have a free pass because it doesn't matter to me because
yeah,
I don't need to be their language police, and
yeah,
everybody else I wouldn't put up with it. But those our two children, they definitely have a free pass.
yeah, yeah. I think that's the thing with our children, that parental bond that we have. In a sense, my children have got a free pass to be who they are
Hmm.
because you treasure that relationship so much. And I think, particularly, what you said earlier about that difficult time where you were separated from your daughter. Um, it's so painful as a parent, isn't it?
Hmm. It is.
Yeah, yeah.
So your two daughters transitioned some time ago. Um,
Mhm.
on reflection, I mean, going back about what you've learned and what you're still learning, I'm sure. What advice, if you give advice to other parents of trans children, what would you say?
Yeah, lots of things. I think the absolute number one thing that my husband and I talk about when we say, what would we say, is that you start with so many fears and worries, but we can see that this has been a very positive experience for our two daughters. As I said at the start, how have they changed? They're so much more themselves, and they are happily living as women. That's who they are. And that this is a big change for all of us, but it can be, you can accept it and you can move forward, and it's perhaps not what you expected, but that doesn't mean that it's it has to be sad. I guess, yes, there are things where you are coping with things that perhaps you've missed from the past. Their lives are different to what we thought their lives would be. But I think the really important thing for us is that we've accepted our children for who they are, and that they know that they can be themselves and that they are loved. And for us, that's obviously the most important thing. And I think when you find out that your children are transgender, it brings up all sorts of worries. But there's so much I could say here, Joe, but I think things that helped me at the beginning was to know that, in a sense, what all they're changing is the outside, in a way. Because our children, like I was talking about how they all get together and joke about memes, that's exactly the same as it ever was. They are exactly the same people, but more themselves. And their character, their person, they are still those. We can still see who they were when they were little kids. That hasn't gone. They're still themselves. And so it feels like, initially, it feels like you're losing everything. And then you realize, actually, the stuff that you have lost is really not important, because who they are, that's the most important thing. And that doesn't change. They don't change. So, yeah, that's what I'd say, is that it feels like it's a really big thing, and you feel like you're in the midst of this sea without an anchor, and it feels like everything's out of control. But actually, you find out there is a harbour, a safe harbour, and that's in accepting them for who they are. And family life continues as it ever was. So that's what I'd like to say, I think. And how about you, being a trans parent? What advice would you give to other people like yourself?
I suppose for me, the lesson I've learned over the years is about patience, time, talking loads, but also listening loads as well. Um, I'd also say that not having any fixed red lines about, my way or the highway, or this is who I am, please demand respect. And I think by taking a softer approach, where my children and I have our relationship our way, and we don't need to define it by any other person's definition of a traditional family. I can allow, I could be comfortable being dad. I could be comfortable with whatever pronouns they choose to use. I could be comfortable with how they talk and treat me, because they effectively treat me the same as they've always treated me. We're just evolving it into a more feminine version of that. And I think if I'd have been overly insistent at the beginning, or still maintain that insistence, it would have damaged our relationship probably irreparably. And I think it also matters how old the children are. If they're very young, maybe you have a different experience than if they're teenagers, or if they're 20-year-olds, or if they're adults themselves. So I think for me, they were early and mid 20s, and so we just did it our way. And I think one thing I did learn is that the instability in the family affects all of the family. So when my daughter wasn't able to process this, it impacted how my son felt, how I felt, how my wife felt, and how we all got together. And I think now we've resolved that. we are now a functioning family, and because it's kind of like this shared experience. One person accepts it, we're getting on with it. We all accept it. We all get on with it. So I think that having that one person out of kilter disrupted everything. So I think time. Don't get angry. Yes, you can lie in bed and cry and feel despair and all these things, and you wish it was different. But try and always lose the anger. I had anger inside me at certain points. I was really angry, frustrated. I wanted to demand and scream, and I resisted. I resisted, and I don't. And I just the outside world just saw me upset and tearful and humble, not the anger I was feeling inside. And I think that was really important to make sure that I still maintain that dignity. That I wanted our children to still love me, and I realised that in order to be loved, you have to be lovable. I could have been a person that wasn't lovable, and I recognised that, and that was a real focus to me. So the advice, I suppose, out of all of that is time, patience, recognise the challenge everyone's facing. Don't demand, listen, talk, evolve, not revolution. And it's a long game. Play that long game and work together. That's all I would say.
Yeah, yeah. I'd just pop in and say that I think the other thing that I think is really important was, especially at the start, because I had so many feelings and it was hard. It was hard at the start. Was that I just kept thinking to myself, I want my kids to know they're loved. That's the most important thing. And that decision to love them and to put their needs at the center, to effectively to be the mum that I wanted to be and be true to those values. That was my guiding light at the start, and that helped me through so much. Because when I had those feelings, it was, well, what do they need? How can I help them? How can I support them? Because they're going through such a lot. And so that, I think, similar to you, loving is so important. That's what families are about, really. It should be about, hopefully.
Thank you, Josephine. So that's Josephine Hughes. I understand you're a BACP registered counsellor and psychotherapist.
Yeah.
Got a book and podcast. So tell how do people get hold of you if they'd like to find out more?
Yeah, the book's in my head at the moment, but the podcast is coming out on the 14th of November 2022, and it's called Gloriously Unready. So it's about being unready for all sorts of change in life, and series one is about being unready for being a parent of transgender children. Obviously, people can find that on where you find podcasts. And also, if people would like to visit my website, it's gloriouslyunready.com, or you can do it a shortcut, which is unrdy.com. And you can sign up there. There's a handout there for parents of transgender children for when the kids first come out, some of the useful things that I learned through that process. And you can sign up for updates for the podcast and find it there as well.
Fantastic. I mean, that's so important because, as we both know, there's so much misinformation out there, so much negative advice around trans children and parental advice, or even advice to schools. So it's really, really amazing that you are providing this resource with experience, not fear or misinformation. So no, that's fantastic, and I'll make sure we put those details in the show notes as well.
Thank you.
So finally, my name is Joanne Lockwood. I describe myself as an inclusion belonging specialist as well as a parent of 2 children. I work with people in organisations throughout the UK, Europe and elsewhere, and I promote positive people experiences. So if you'd like to find out more about me, please visit seechangehappen.co.uk. That's SEE changehappen.co.uk. So thanks for watching and listening today. Please do subscribe to our channel, click the little notification bell, and you'll be notified of future videos we're going to be launching. So thank you very much. I appreciate your time for getting this far. Take care. Bye.